Hi, folks. I'm Nick Stevens, and this is my podcast, The Human Element, where my hope is to shine the light of focus on humans and their stories. This is the spirit within the circuitry, the heartbeat behind the algorithms, and the connections between silicon and soul. The first brave soul who allowed me to interview him is Siadhal Magos, the CEO and co-founder of Metaview. Metaview is a conversational artificial intelligence platform that I have been enjoying. I've completely embraced it, and it's completely changed my day-to-day work as a recruiter. I hope you enjoy my very first podcast, and thank you again to you, Siadhal, for saying yes. So huge thank you. I mean, it's you're the first on my podcast. I cannot say thank you enough for trusting me to just have this conversation with you and to sort of dig into my ideas and what I'd like to be doing in the world, in recruitment particularly, but in the world of AI. I think we're uniquely positioned, you and I, in that my conversation is going to be around the people behind the technologies. And I think that recruitment is a particularly interesting area of AI when it comes to the human, right? Because historically, that's what I do. I interview people, and now to interview the people behind the technology is a really cool thing to do. So it's no secret that I'm a massive fan of Metaview. It's definitely the first AI tool that I have found made enormous positive impact in my job immediately. And I think that's how I kind of benchmark what these AI tools are capable of, is how quickly they become sticky and how quickly they become like a part of my every single day. Um, so I dove a little into your profile to go back to the recruiter in me. And I thought it was really interesting that you actually have probably never really worked in recruitment, and you don't look like an engineer either. So can you talk us through your journey and how you came to be the CEO and co-founder of a recruitment AI tool?
Yeah, nice. Well, thanks so much for having me on. You were an early adopter of Metaview, so I'm pumped to be an early adopter of this platform as well. So how did I get to founding a recruiting AI company? Obviously, a sort of a relatively winding road. It's not like it's something that I had, in my mind's eye when I was at high school or at university, or even like a long time after that. To be honest, I definitely left university without a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I had studied history while I was at university here in London. Actually, had applied to a bunch of law schools to sort of convert to become a lawyer after that. Thankfully, got into a few as well, and was literally about to sort of go and start that journey when I don't know. I don't know if it was a moment of clarity, or maybe I look back at it and think it was a moment of clarity. But at the time, I just wasn't sure I actually wanted to do it, and I felt pretty, frankly, ignorant about what else was out there apart from the really obvious professions. I grew up in a household there. My father was a doctor. My mother was a nurse. So sort of obviously really great jobs, great upbringing, but they didn't know a ton about private sector. So I didn't really feel that informed about it. So I decided to just get out into the world and see what I could find, and see if I found something that I was passionate about, or just enjoyed doing. And then sort of just won't sort of go through all the details, but it essentially lucked out and found myself at a pre-IPO internet company that went on to IPO about sort of 18 months, 2 years after I joined. I joined on a sort of a generalist graduate scheme. So I sort of joined in this commercial role, essentially, like with more of a marketing bent than anything else. But actually ended up developing a really good relationship with the product director there, who went on to become the VP of products. And so sort of pretty quickly migrated into the product organization, which I had no idea what that was at this time. Again, I was a sort of a real like I say, I was pretty ignorant about the world of tech at this point. I mean, I was interested in it, but I was not deep in it in any way. And that point on, I look at that as a really big inflection point for me, because the company I was at was a company called Betfair, really like awesome technology organization, and obviously one of the breakout internet success stories from Europe and the UK at that time. And just started from that point on, just got incredibly passionate and nerdy about tech. And I would say, I mean, I refined and developed some technical skills over that, but really what I was passionate about was the intersection of tech and business. Like, what does this change for like how does this generate an advantage for whether it's in a company or a human being to have leverage, was what I ended up getting like really passionate about. And really where I got my, if I hopefully I was a decent product person, and what made me a good product person primarily was my ability to champion the end user. That's what I felt like I was always really good. Like, even if I didn't have, if I was a, early 20s product manager or product owner working with some sort of really gnarled and experienced engineers, what I actually pretty quickly felt pretty comfortable about was that actually my level of empathy for the user, like I'd done the 10,000 hours, as it were, of understanding the people that are using this, and I could actually represent that pretty effectively, and vice versa. I should have had enough technical chops to, come back the other way and sort of make sure stakeholders and maybe even customers were aware of technical realities of why something wasn't possible or whatever it might be. So that was always my strong spot, was championing users. So I think that was like probably the first inflectional moment of just getting into products. And then I guess we've only got so long, so I don't want to go too deep. Essentially, gradually worked my way. I always had in mind I really want to join a world-class products organization. Microsoft was a great company. I was obviously very junior there, but I sort of had a few changes, joined a startup, really enjoyed my time there. Funnily enough, that's where I met Metaview's other co-founder, Sharia, who's a world-class engineer, which obviously he brings the deeper engineering chops to Metaview. But still have my eye on here. I really want to join like a world-class product organization. And that organization that I ended up joining was Uber. So I joined them in 2016. They were a very engineering-led company, and they were growing incredibly quickly at that time. And I was pumped to be there. But what I spent a bunch of my time on was hiring. So because we were growing so fast. Not as a recruiter, of course, because I partnered with recruiters, but I was really functioning as a hiring manager, for my own team, also interviewing for other folks. And it's taking up a good, 20 to 30% of my time, all things considered, when you're growing that fast. And so that's where the sort of the hiring element of this came in. So definitely started Metaview with a little bit of naivety around what it really took to make an amazing product for recruiters and interviewers. But I would say more strongly came in with that hiring manager perspective, and then had to learn the recruiter's perspective over, we've been building a company for Metaview for 5 years now. So, much as I didn't have a recruiting background, it's made up a pretty big chunk of my career at this point. So have been spending a lot of time speaking with folks and understanding their pain points and what we could do to solve that. So that's the background.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense to me now. So that's super interesting to me because of the empathy element. I was thinking it, and then you said the word empathy, and I thought that's exactly it. And it's so interesting as well, because that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about the human element, outside of the engineering, outside of the anything technical, the people that came up with this idea. And as a product person, you in order to be good at it, if I hear you right, you need to have that empathy for the end user. Having been put in this situation where you had to do a ton of hiring yourself, you're like forced into a place where you're empathizing with recruiters.
Yeah. Well,
and maybe
actually slightly. So two things. I think directionally, yes. Two things that would sort of have a slightly different accent on it would be, one, I don't think you have to be like I just think empathy was my strong suit as a PM. I think there are loads of amazing product people who aren't. Don't get me wrong, it's still an important part of the spider diagram of what makes up a product manager.
Got other strengths.
It doesn't have to be your number one strength. Yeah, exactly. And there's still great people who operate differently. The second thing is the empathy wasn't really for recruiters when we started Metaview. Actually, we started with this in mind of, hey, listen, I've identified that as a hiring manager, I felt really under-leveraged when I was doing hiring compared to when I was a product manager, where I had incredible instrumentation, incredible tooling at my fingertips when I was building products. But when I'm doing hiring, I didn't. So we actually came at it initially from this hiring manager perspective. And they're still a really important stakeholder for us when we think about our business. But what we realized, which is, obviously looks really obvious looking backwards, is of course, the people who are most engaged with recruiting are the recruiters. So you better make sure you're solving their problems too. And the sort of the positive, there's definitely areas where the sort of recruiter problems differ from the hiring manager problems, but there's also enough overlap where you're like, listen, we're all trying to achieve the same thing here. We're trying to efficiently and reliably bring in great people to the company. But of course, the recruiters have the biggest impact on that. So it just ended up making more sense to sort of turbocharge and empower recruiters so that they can in turn actually contribute to an even more effective hiring process that a hiring manager would be a beneficiary of. So I think it's more like, we started out with this hiring manager view. We were scratching our own itch initially. We had to learn about the rest of much more about the other folks involved. And actually, it turns out when you go through that idea maze, there's this whole other cohort of folks that if you can delight them, there's actually this really positive impact on the HMs too. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but my hope and my guess is that with your adoption of Metaview, one of the knock-on consequences of that is the people you're serving, the hiring managers and the leaders that you're working with benefit, whether they know it explicitly because of Metaview or not. But just the mere fact that you have more leverage, you're running better conversations, you're getting to know candidates better, you're giving better context to the hiring team, they're benefiting from it too.
And I've got a stronger history to go back to, because that's where the machine does it better, right? It keeps an archive better than my brain's ever going to be able to. So to be able to go back to a particular point in an interview, and even now with the new stuff that you guys have done, like ask Metaview for insights, like what does it think? It's not necessarily going to be spot on just yet. You've got to have the human element, once again, your instinct. But I think that the tool has really bridged the gap between hiring managers and recruiters as well, because I've been doing this since 2008, right? And the communication between hiring manager and recruiter is always one of the most interesting ones as a recruiter, because every hiring manager seems to have their own kind of way that they want things to be done, but ultimately they want a succinct summary. And that's the core of what Metaview has given recruiters, right? It's the ability to go, bam, this is your person. Is that who you want? So yeah, so massive. Okay, so I'm also super curious about the timeline. So ChatGPT drops in like November 2022, but you guys have been at this. You've been plugging at this for over 5 years now.
Yeah.
You kind of explained how it came about, but how did you sort of anticipate that this was going to potentially become the next huge wave? Did you anticipate that, or was it just like a really lucky break?
Bit of both. So definitely, with the reason we had contributed, 4.5 years of our life, and I guess times by the number of folks in the company into this, is testament to the fact that we believe there was an opportunity here. But for sure, the game's changed with the emergence of essentially these LLMs that are just incredibly powerful and pragmatically applicable in the immediate term. Like you mentioned, one of the things you love about Metaview is the time to value is so short. And I would actually say it's really that time to value thing that changed. When you think about what was Metaview before, a lot of the functionality that you really enjoy, and after, it's really the big thing that's changed is time to value. So what we were working on before we embraced, but basically before a lot of the capabilities that people are enjoying now around interview note-taking, scorecard generation, TLDR, like summary, interview summaries, and this assistant Q&A. What we were working on before then was more, it was more aimed at helping heads of talent or senior leadership within a company or within the recruiting function understand their interview process as a whole. So still really important. We still totally believe that's a good thing to build. It's still part of what Metaview is. The reason maybe we weren't as, well, frankly, as widely adopted and as well known at that point, we had some amazing customers, Robinhood, Brex, Anduril, Pure Storage, Angel, like really great forward-thinking customers that loved the product. They stuck with it. They kept on renewing all these and expanding and all these things. So there was definitely something there. So we had conviction. But the problem with it was it really relied on having a lot of, you need to be like an expert level organization. You need to have done everything else. Hey, we've got our ATS sorted. We've structured our interviews really well. We've got our data, and the ontology of our ATS is really in really great shape. Now we're going to layer on this next thing to bring us to the next level, which is interview intelligence and understanding our interview process. So really, really relevant to those folks, but that's not the majority of people. And also the other downside to it was the amount of time from buying the product to actually seeing the value was too long, because you say, okay, well, Nick, you're going to roll this out to 600 of your colleagues, and it's only valuable if you roll it out to everyone. So big decision for you to make. Are you going to sort of make this one of the things you spend a lot of time on, is rolling this out to your colleagues? And then in 3 to 6 months, you'll start to get some interesting data about the quality of your process, and then you can start to fix it. So there are some real great businesses who work on that sort of timescale of time to value, but it wasn't actually great for us. Again, if you go back to what our strengths are, which is understanding the human beings who are actually using the product and designing around their needs, and maybe even in some ways understanding their needs better than they understand it themselves, so that we can fix it. It wasn't playing to that. What these LLM powered features, like I mentioned, around Q&A and summarization enabled, was for us to actually solve the recruiter and the interviewer problem, not the senior leadership problem. And guess what? It turns out if you solve those people's problem, you are actually solving the senior leadership's more important problem anyway, which is, how do I make my people super productive and super high performing? So just
nice knock-on effect.
Credit for identifying the overall problem, which is, hey, there's really interesting data in these interviews, and they're really important, and they're not very reliable right now. Can we do something about it? So we were fishing in the right pond, and then we just had a massive accelerant, which was, we were really well placed to make use of these sort of foundational innovations that companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and others have invested in.
I think it was similar for you guys than it must have been than it was for us at Terraflow.ai. It's like, hang on, we've got this thing that everybody's talking about in our name.
Yeah.
This is where we are, hello world, like, we're ready for you. That's super cool. But there must have been some massive challenges along the way. I mean, there must have been things that happened for you to realize, okay, we started this out thinking of the stakeholders. We actually, in order to solve this and to be of use and service and real value, we need to help out the recruiters. What are some of the tough things that happened along the way? Some of the challenges you guys have faced?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the challenges, I think we've constantly had a hubbub of and a good growth of people that are fundamentally starting to get around the idea that, hey, the fact that all of our interviews are being had into cameras and into microphones means that there's just this sort of deluge of new data that we can start to capture. So we've always had growing. So I wouldn't look at that as a challenge, but I would say that, working out how to massively accelerate that has always been something we focused on. Now, the moments on that journey where we were like, oh damn, this is not what we had in mind. One that initially, of course, was as you mentioned, we've been around for 5 years, so that we started pre-COVID. When COVID hit, of course, there was a lot of disruption in the market. Lots of people doing a lot of layoffs and sort of thinking they were sort of buckling down for a really dark and cold winter. It turned out actually a lot of companies, especially in tech, did really well in the sort of the COVID period. But initially that was frankly quite bad for our business. But the one that was actually more damaging for us was the sort of H2 22, when all the mass layoffs in tech started to kick off. That was a really challenging moment for us. It sort of, again, this was before we had a lot of the functionality that you really love, for example, and since you adopted the product, Nix, that really started to, people's problems, our customers started to focus much more on the problem that was right in front of them. And that was not something that Metaview solved for people incredibly quickly at that time. So that was probably the moment, in fact, and now look back on it as, obviously not a good thing that all these layoffs happened, but the fact that our business actually slowed down. So again, we were on a pretty good growth rate. It slowed down as a result of these layoffs. That made us ask ourselves internally really harsh questions around, hey, are we actually making our customers successful here? Are we making it more likely that this company that does use our product is going to beat this company that doesn't use our product in the marketplace, whether that's for talent or literally just the marketplace in general? And, I don't think we had enough conviction. The answer to that was yes. Whereas now, so what that inspired was a change of product direction, the one that you just described, which is focusing more on the end user. What are the pain points that these people face that if we remove them, they'll feel like superhuman, super powered recruiters. And since we've sort of honed in on that, again, with the luck we had of having these, access to these foundational LLMs, we were now able to build something that much better sort of matched up against that. So I'd say it was that challenge, the sort of, second half of 2022 layoff, contagion was a really tough time to be selling recruiting software, let alone recruiting AI. I potentially still not a great market, but we've really got something that has resonated and is making a difference for people, such that we're as a company, we're growing really well now. So.
If you're comfortable, and I can always edit this out, but are you comfortable with sharing some of the growth, the data, like where you guys sort of started in the early years and what's happened since well, maybe just this year.
Yeah.
That's what I'm super curious about. Like, as the world has gotten used to the letters AI,
Yeah.
and seen that there's a lot that can really streamline processes and so on. It's an interesting. Just to go back to what you were saying, I didn't put all of those pieces together. Like the evolution of an AI tool like Metaview, and the way that COVID hit and had all of these people at home doing these kind of Zoom calls, this Google Meet thing. This creates data. It creates content, right, for you guys to refine, and it creates data for you to use. And then you've got the artist's tools. It's like, okay, we've got all
Yeah.
this stuff now. We can turn it into something useful. So that's super
that's not that is true, and there's definitely a part of Metaview that is sort of harnessing this like actually turning a conversation into some forms of quantitative data. There's a part of Metaview that does that. But what I more meant by data in that context was I meant it in its raw form. Just the mere fact that you could go from it being really weird, the idea that you would record a conversation with someone because you're in a meeting room. That's just a strange phenomena. And maybe less strange now, but at the time it was a bit weird. To a world where, well, hang on, my camera is already streaming my face to you. My microphone is already streaming my audio to you. How big of a difference is it if we decide to record that? Like, it's so much smaller of a sort of a behavior, like user experience jump. That's what I meant by data. You can capture the conversation. I don't even mean, even if you don't do any analysis to it, the foundational change was the data is now in a sort of capturable form or on a capturable channel. I don't know if I interrupted there.
No, that's cool. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, and then so in terms of the growth, like where you guys were before and after.
Yeah, so I won't speak specific numbers, but we were sort of in the dozens of relatively large customers coming into February of this year. You mentioned ChatGPT launched in November. We basically had the team working obviously with appropriate time off, but sort of through December and January is when we were like, okay, this is the new thing. This is going to change how companies operate. And we're in this really lucky position where we can actually do something really meaningful for people. We already have thousands of interviews going through our platform. We've already got thousands of people who are actually using our product day to day, who we can deploy these features to, get feedback, iterate on. And so I think in late Jan or maybe early Jan, in fact, it may have been late December, started to sort of put some of these very hacky AI features in front of some select customers, and then launched we launched these features in late Feb. And so from February, where again we were sort of in the couple of dozens and dozens, like multiple dozens of customers, we now sort of measure things more in like how many hundreds of new companies do we get per month? So like a very different world for us. A big part of that is because the product is fundamentally more impactful for more people. Like it has more impact.
It's better now. Yeah.
It's better now, exactly. And part of it is because also because of this drive we had. Hey, we want to focus on recruiters. It changes your, I guess, what we would call internally our go-to-market motion. Like we were no longer, trying to get meetings with VPs of recruiting. We were trying to get in front of including recruiting leaders. I'm not trying to say we don't care about them at all, but who we wanted to focus on were people who are running a lot of interviews every day. And that just changes, obviously, the sort of the way that you end up marketing and selling, for want of a better word, your product.
And I'm sure to some extent, I don't think I just speak for myself. Like there was a fire lit underneath us when AI really, really hit the market, and it just became this, the household conversation, in every single space, everywhere, right? And so I work at an AI company, and I think I'm really fortunate in that I'm constantly encouraged to go and find whatever amazing tools are out there as a recruiter, not just to do my job, like what should engineers be adopting right now? What should marketing people be adopting right now? So that when I get a job spec for, say, a social media manager, one of my questions now is, what AI tools are you using? Just to see whether we're aligned, or this person has maybe found something that we don't know about yet. My role has sort of evolved into more of a researcher. So that's been pretty interesting. And I think that we're really fortunate in that we're encouraged to go out and go and look at this stuff. And I think a lot of people are quite scared of it. So I'm curious to know, on that note, what you, as Siadhal, as the human,
Mm.
um, I know I watched an interview with you and Hung recently, and it was super great. You guys had such an interesting chat about why AI will save recruitment. And one of my big takeaways, there were several, but one of the big ones was that, humans are the decision makers. We've got, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit more with you, because I'm super curious about where the machine ends and the human begins, and what will never be replaceable in humans. So what do you think about that? Like, where is the human highlighted in all of this AI capability?
So the way that I think you sort of like touched on it there, which is around decisions, and I think there's like a very there's like a soft way to interpret that, which soft not meaning not important, just soft meaning hard to sort of completely put your finger on, and then there's a sort of a hard interpretation of that. So if you want to start with the hard interpretation, human beings are still going to be accountable for the actions that are done in their name. So if you decide to adopt AI a tool for whatever sort of business flow or even personal, whatever, your personal, for personal reasons even, and it does something that you're not happy with, well, guess what? You're still on the hook for that. Like, that's still you that did that. It's not like you can completely sort of devolve yourself of responsibility for essentially the actions that are done in your name. So I think that's like a good thing to internalize for folks. And this is why there's so much sort of there's a lot of due diligence around how we use AI in like decision, like actual very clear decision making, because if you should understand how an AI is making a decision, because if you can't, then obviously you could have negative outcomes, and we've seen some of those negative outcomes, undesirable outcomes in the past. So I think that's the hard one. Like, if you decide to adopt AI, you are still accountable for the outcome. If I put that in Metaview's world, that's an example of that would be, yes, Metaview writes your notes for you. But, and much as hopefully, I hope customers rely on Metaview and the sort of the accuracy and the precision of their notes as much as possible. But I'd still say, like, these are still your notes. Like, we've done the work for you. You might get to the point where you're like, you know what, I have so much faith in Metaview that my review of those notes might actually only be a few seconds. But it's still, you're still accountable. So, just remember that. Think of it as a thing that accelerates you. The other option is you write it all yourself, and then it takes you sort of half an hour instead of 30 seconds. So but we still think that 30-second review is useful, until further notice, let's say. So that's one. Human accountability still remains for anything that's done in your name. The second, softer one is, in a world where we sort of, if you do sort of fast forward to a sort of a hypothetical world where everything is being decided by AI, then you're going to struggle to find any alpha. You're going to struggle to like actually be better than the next company that is also selling this product, or the next service, professional who is also providing the same professional service, or whatever it might be. So there's going to be there's going to come a point where we're all going to, well, not even realize, what we're going to see is that the human beings are still going to be the alpha in the loop. They're going to be the difference. Like, how you decide to deploy that AI, which tools or which agents, AI agents that you're using, do you have close oversight over because you think that thing's really important, and which do you decide not to have any oversight over because you don't think that's that important, and you're just happy with whatever the AI outputs. That's going to be how we all sort of end up. And there's obviously we're all going to be using this sort of like colony of agents to help us with our day-to-day, whether we know it or not. It could all be sort of under the hood. That's the way that works, but it's going to be happening. And where you're going to end up, where Nix is going to be manifested as an operator is in how she decides to either oversee this, change this, or just let that run because it's better for my efficiency. And so it's really hard to put your finger on it, because I think we all should end up doing it in a slightly different way, because that's what makes us unique. It's the same as if you were say you're a manager of people, and you decide to bring in 3 inexperienced people into your team, let's say, new starters, entry-level roles. You start to sort of just delegate tasks and sort of projects to these people. For first time round, for all of them, you're going to probably look pretty closely at at the work they've done and give them pretty detailed feedback. Next time round, one of them's improved a bunch, the other one has hardly made any improvements. So you're probably in future not going to oversee that first one quite as much, but you're really going to focus on this other person who hasn't been. And that's the same way we're going to end up using our AIs. We're going to end up sort of deciding how much it warrants, how much marginal effort should I put into overseeing these agents, based on the output that I'm seeing from them? Or how much effort should I put into
And the
training?
value. Yeah.
How much effort should I put into training this agent? Should I actually sort of try and really coach this agent a little bit more because it's not quite getting what I'm after? Or do I just say, you know what, no, I'm going to use a different tool because this is not like that. That's going to be, it's the analogies are really clean, but also it means there's no hard answer because we all manage differently. Like I'm sure if you and I were in the same company, we'd probably be different managers. Like, you know, maybe I'm a micromanager and maybe you're like, you really empower people, give them autonomy. And, you know, sometimes it's good to be forceful and sort of tell people what to do. Other times it's good to give them free reign and sort of you get better results that way. It's really hard to know in advance.
The image that comes to mind is like each one of us as the captain of the ship, you know, and we build the ship determined by what the needs are, what the outputs need to be, what we are accountable for. You know, you're responsible for X, Y, and Z. You decide to use those tools, but ultimately you are the captain of the ship. You are steering it. You are telling those things what to do. You're the key decision maker. Got you. So that's where the humans highlighted. Okay, I know we've actually run over time. If I could steal you for one more minute to ask you what's next. Like every time I get a newsletter from Metaview, it's like some other funky things come out. I know you can use it in like 30 plus different languages now. What can we expect in the coming months, years? Like what is Metaview going to look like in the next year, 2, 3?
Yeah. So for the sort of, let's say the short term, so let's say the next 6 to 12 months, really totally focused on making it so that we remove as much toil from a recruiter's day-to-day as possible. So in the short term, what that will mean is interviews are really important conversations, but they're obviously only one type of conversation. So what you'll see is Metaview being relevant and useful for more high leverage conversations, sort of like soup to nuts. So whether that's the onboarding, the intake meeting with a hiring manager to understand the role, or the debrief meeting with all of the interviewers to understand whether this person's a fit. Like, how can we make it so that we sort of put all of the admin and the sort of the note taking associated with those meetings and let you really engage, you know, coach the hiring manager at the top of the funnel. So you're actually more aligned initially when you start the search. And therefore you sort of, you know, maybe you can do a better job as a recruiter filtering out candidates because you're really in tune with that HM now. And you've got this really canonical, summary of what the rec is that you both contributed to, because hey, this third party Metaview took the notes and this is what they summarized, we discussed. So this is, you know, we can obviously edit it, but this is what we discussed. All the way through to debrief, of course, same thing. You know, you really want to be, as a recruiter, you really want to be marshalling, and I think the captain analogy is you're the captain of that meeting as well. Actually, a lot of the time actually ends up being cat herding and note taking, and this person said this and this, and that's just not actually how you create a really high quality conversation where you potentially have some difficult moments where you hold interviewers to account about what they're saying and what evidence they have and all these sorts of things that you really, every recruiter will tell you they want to be doing that. So basically, anyway, I'm going a bit into the detail there. We want to focus more on other high leverage moments where recruiters are currently not empowered to, I would say, put their best foot forward in the way that actually are really well suited to doing, because they tend to be really good at sort of these, some of these softer skills. And then on the other side is what I describe. So you think of that as like our automation roadmap. How can we automate more of a recruiter's job so that they can focus on the really high impact human moments? The other side of it, you may have heard me talking about sort of this other category of things, is around detection. So how can we start to, as we get more and more companies who decide to roll out Metaview to more and more of their interviewers, like beyond just their recruiting team, how can we use that, the fact that we have access to this data to detect things that help the company win? So that might be things like, right now you can ask Metaview a question about a given interview, like, hey, what did the candidate mention their comp expectations were? Or, hey, what did they say? You know, just bring me to that moment where they talked about having an argument with the coach. You can just use it as like in a very utilitarian, useful way. I don't want to underplay it. It's great. What would also be really cool is if you're the, you know, comp and benefits person at company X, and you are currently paying a lot of money to get compensation benchmarks from a third party. Well, you could have primary data here. You could just ask Metaview, hey, look at every interview we've done with every machine learning engineer in the last 12 months and tell me how their comp expectations have changed over time, split by geography. And 5 seconds later, you get your answer. This is what people are telling you in those conversations. Before Metaview, you wouldn't even, as the comp person, the rewards and benefits person, you wouldn't even thought of going and asking every single interviewer, hey, can you remember what they said? Or like going through everyone's scorecard. You just wouldn't even thought about it. So now you'll start to realize, wow, these conversations represent like a corpus of data that even just using natural language without having to be like a data analyst, I can just get the piece of information I need to inform my strategy as someone who I didn't even think I was that related to the recruiting flow. I thought I was doing something else, but it actually turns out, no, there's a lot of valuable data in there. So those are the two buckets that you'll see us
And I
focusing on.
kind of feel like now that you mention it, a lot of that functionality already exists within Metaview, right? I mean, I could be interviewing hiring managers when a new position comes up, and I could have that recording, and I could go to the particular questions that I asked, and it could be my archive for those conversations. I hadn't thought of that. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm going to start doing
Well,
that
you
immediately.
definitely could, but I think it's classic 80-20 stuff. It's like, yes, there's, I think, really motivated folks could find a way to use our product. Right now, it's amazing for interviews. If you're motivated to use it for other ways and you sort of forgive a couple of, corner cases, maybe it would be good for other things too. But we really want to really understand the workflow. Like, if we're part of that intake meeting, what do you usually do as a recruiter after the intake? Well, maybe you say, actually, I'm going to go and review the JD. Turns out the JD doesn't actually match up against what we discussed. And so you're going to do this laborious, cross-matching it. Maybe we can do that bit if we're in the intake meeting, maybe we can do that bit for you too. Like, hey, maybe we should change the JD or the job adverts in this way. Or we should change the interview plan in this way, given what you discussed in this meeting. Or maybe here are 5 profiles that you might want to use during the meeting to see, hey, are we aligned that this is the type of profile we'd be talking about? If, given the meeting we've just had, these are the 5 profiles that Metaview spat out for me. So I think, yes, you could use it for the specific thing I mentioned, but when you really think about how do we turbocharge that workflow, how do we make it so that you come out of an intake meeting or like an intake process, let's say, if there's a bit after it, much more calibrated and much more better positioned to execute exceptionally. I think there's more that we'd want to do.
Nice. That's exciting. That sounds really good. I look forward to that. I look forward to that in my own personal capacity,
Yeah.
Genuinely. Fantastic. Okay, well, I know I've taken up more of your time than expected. It's been really, really awesome speaking to you, and I can't wait to see, these things unfold.